Super. Now, if you think owning a home is a distant dream, you're certainly not alone. But our next guest is proof that with know-how and discipline, it is absolutely possible, even in the midst of post-COVID property buying frenzy. Eddie Dilleen is just 29 years old and owns 29 properties. He joins us now to share his secrets. How are you, Eddie?
Great, thank you.
Good on you.
Thanks for having me.
You appeared on Studio 10 a couple of years ago. I was not here, so I haven't heard this story. Explain how you managed to buy your first property as a teenager with a job at McDonald's.
Definitely. So I saved up for about 2 years while I was working at McDonald's. I was still actually in school between the ages of like 16 to 18. So managed to save up about $200 a week, so it was fairly modest. After 2 years, had about $20,000, and I was trying to, find out what kind of property can I buy. Had that 20K, and I used it as a 10% deposit, and I bought a unit on the Central Coast, and that was my first one.
Unreal, huh?
What I love about you is that you have this incredible backstory, and you really weren't born with a silver spoon in your mouth. You didn't have any help from your parents to buy your first property either. You grew up in housing commission homes in Mount Druitt. So what was it about that upbringing and that kind of start to life that drove you then to want to get onto the property market and absolutely dominate?
I think I figured out from a young age, as you said, housing commission, single mum on a pension as well, we struggled massively. It was extremely hard, even just to put the food on the table a lot of the time. So, growing up in that kind of atmosphere, I figured, in the future for myself, for my future kids, all the rest of it, I want to be able to take care of my family. I want to be able to change my situation, and I want to be able to prove that it doesn't matter where you come from, and you can do it, basically, yeah.
When we spoke to you a couple of years ago, you had 16 properties, and now you have 29.
Yes.
How did you really ramp up so quickly in such a short amount of time?
You definitely have to have a strategic formula. So to me, I've really done the numbers, the nuts and bolts, data statistics, etc. I've used many different ways, such as saving deposits, using equity as well. But you have to learn a lot about finance and also how to structure your portfolio. So you can't just go off in there and buy a bunch of properties without the right education.
Yeah, I think it's interesting as well because, say from my point of view, when I'm thinking of I need to buy a property for my family and stuff, my thought is I'm going to have to buy something that I can live in. But that wasn't your first thought. So you may have covered that before. You weren't living up there where you bought the house.
Yes, correct. Definitely not.
So where does that come from? In terms of if you're not happy with the life that you're living or where you're living, why would you think of buying a house up there if you're not intending on going up there?
I think for me it was basically I wanted to get my foot in the market.
Yeah.
I couldn't afford even where I lived, which was out west in Sydney back then, and I was on a Macca's wage. So I was on $500-600 a week, and I was saving $200 a week of that, trying to put that away. But I figured out that I couldn't buy my dream house right away. Yeah. And I think that's for a lot of people. If you're starting out, you might not be able to buy your $1 million property right away to live in with and be all fancy right away. But for me, I found out if I can just get my foot in the market, then at least I can build up equity within that property, and that in another year or 2, 3 years, as an example, I could use a bit of equity. I would have had rental income. I would have, learnt to be a landlord. I would have figured out all the kind of stuff that a lot of people don't learn in school. So,
how do you know where to invest in those? So you have to be a pretty close market watcher, do you?
Definitely, yes. I'm very crazy passionate about looking at different property markets and finding out where to invest. Yeah.
That mentality to me is so much more impressive than the outcome of it. I think it's superb that you think that way. You purchased an extra 9 properties in the last year. Why did COVID make it such a good time to buy?
Look, overall, I guess when COVID first started, they lowered the interest rates multiple times. And usually in history, when they lower interest rates, it gives people the chance to borrow more, money. I guess, yes, there's ups and downs with buying during COVID, but I saw it as an opportunity to really try to add more properties onto my portfolio. You're able to, right now, you can even do 5% deposits to buy a house. So people say it's hard to get in the market. Imagine if you're buying probably 500K, 5% is 25K. A person can save that up, as an example. I did it over 2 years.
And you are pretty thrifty in day-to-day life as well. What are some of the money-saving tips that you can share with other people who would like to get onto the property market, buy their first property?
Look, the number one thing I can definitely say is I see a lot of people on Instagram, they're flashing the Gucci belts and Louis Vuitton bags right away before they even bought a property, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of, it sounds really cool, it's all lifestyle kind of thing, but if you can put, while you're young or even just want to get in the property market, put as much money as you can away, try to forego those, designer, clothes and bags. I guess that's one thing that I definitely did. I didn't buy any fancy clothes till after I bought my first property.
You said even simple things like meal prepping can save you a ton as well.
100%. So meal prepping is a big one. You know, whether you even set up like a home gym at home as an example, like I've got a treadmill at home, instead of paying like monthly gym membership fees, all that kind of stuff as well, saves you time and money.
So have you used the equity in your properties to build to buy concurrent properties? Is that how it works? And what happens if interest rates start shooting up again?
Yeah, definitely. So
will you have to offload some of your properties?
Not at all, not at all. So in terms of strategy, like I could talk to you all day about strategy, so I'm very, very passionate about it. But as an example, like I've saved up many genuine deposits, and that's a big thing. Like I didn't just use my first property to buy 28 next ones, right?
Yeah.
I've built up equity within them, but also saved as many deposits as I could genuinely. So I would work like 2 jobs when I was, you know, trying to save up many deposits. As an example, you know, saving up 1 deposit per year, I've probably saved, I guess, 12, 13 genuine deposits out of those over the last decade.
It's amazing. And Sydney prices, housing prices, they've reached a new peak. How do we choose what the right location is?
Look, there's many different locations. I guess if it's strictly for investment purposes, as an example, like it might not be where you live. Like if you're as an example on the North Shore and you've on the average kind of income and you can't afford that market, the best kind of location that I've kind of like sticking to are relatively metro kind of areas. So if we're buying your Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, etc., if you're just starting off and you're a young person, you know, you might not buy in the heart of Sydney right away. But you could, as an example, buy a little bit further out, maybe your western suburbs, or you could buy in Brisbane, as an example, as little as like 300K. And then you can use the equity within that to get in the bigger properties.
And is it best to look at your first property, say, as an investment rather than a place to live in? Because I think that's where some young Aussies get a little bit waylaid. They think, oh, well, my first property is going to be, you know, in my neighbourhood where I grew up, close to work, and it's like, well, it's a $4 million property. You can't afford that.
Because that's what we, not the 4 million, but that's what we kind of did. We thought about this is the one we live in, and then you find yourself just kind of burdened with mortgage and kind of under pressure all the time. So this advice is great for people trying to get onto the market, but also people on the market like yourself, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Look, if you can start small, like, yeah, you basically buy in just any kind of market that's a little bit, maybe even a bit further away from where you live, something that you can build up your equity and really kind of get your foot in the market, and then, you know, buy where you want to live in 5, 10 years' time.
Oh, good on you, Eddie. 29
number,
properties by 29. Can't wait to see what you do next year. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, guys, so much.
Thank you. And congratulations. Superb work.